The doorbell's chime echoed through the Franklin household, signaling the arrival of an impending storm. Rita, her hair neatly arranged but her expression tinged with frustration, descended the stairs and made her way to the front door. With a deep breath, she swung it open to reveal Jerry's mother, Mary, standing on the doorstep clad in green slacks and a yellow blouse. "Mother Franklin, please come in," Rita greeted her mother-in-law, her tone polite but strained. Mary stepped into the foyer, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "Hello, dear. My bags are out in the car. Would you mind bringing them in for me?" she requested with a hint of expectation in her voice. "I'll ask Trace to do that before I leave," Rita replied, ushering Mary into the kitchen where the tension seemed to thicken with every passing moment. As they settled at the kitchen table, Mary's gaze sharpened. "Oh, leaving are you? Where are you going?" she inquired, her tone carrying a touch of suspicion. "I still have a few things I need to get from the store," Rita explained, her voice measured as she tried to maintain her composure. "Is there anything you'd like me to get while I'm there?" Mary leaned back in her chair, her expression unimpressed. "You know, you never have any squash or broccoli around here. Why don't you go get some? You can fix a real meal for us tonight," she suggested, her tone carrying a hint of disapproval. "We're having pizza tonight, Mother Franklin," Rita replied, a note of defiance creeping into her voice. Mary's expression darkened. "I don't know why you insist on killing your family with that grease pie all the time. The least they deserve is a good supper. I'm confident you'll serve an identical breakfast as well in the morning," she remarked sharply, her disapproval palpable. Rita bristled at the criticism. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mother Franklin. Perhaps I could pick up some squash specifically for you," she offered, attempting to placate the situation. Mary waved off the suggestion dismissively. "Well, don't go to so much trouble on my account. Besides, your children probably won't eat my healthy suggestions anyway, given they're so accustomed to the junk you give them on a regular basis," she retorted, her tone dripping with disdain. Internally seething but determined to keep her cool, Rita maintained her composure. "I'll go ahead and pick them up anyway, just in case," she replied evenly, her gaze steady. Mary nodded approvingly, a smirk playing on her lips as Trace, Rita's son, entered the kitchen with his skateboard in hand. Seeing his grandmother, Trace forced a polite smile. "Hi, Grandma," Trace greeted her tentatively. Mary beamed and extended her arms. "Dear, how are you? Give your grandma a big kiss," she insisted, her tone expecting compliance. Trace looked at Rita, silently pleading for guidance. Sensing his discomfort, Rita intervened. "Trace, Grandma has some bags in her car. Would you go get them for her?" she directed him, hoping to divert attention away from the uncomfortable situation. "Sure, Mom," Trace replied, eager to leave the tense atmosphere in the kitchen. As Trace exited to retrieve Mary's bags, Mary's expression soured. "What about my hugs and kisses?" she questioned, her tone slightly offended. "Trace is getting too old for that, Mother Franklin," Rita remarked with a slight smirk, a hint of defiance in her tone. Mary's disapproval was evident. "Well, Jerry never had that problem. You just need to learn how to raise a child properly," she commented, her words dripping with judgment. Rita shook her head, silently disagreeing but choosing not to engage further. Mary shifted the conversation. "Oh, where are Courtney and the twins?" she inquired, shifting her focus to the other children in the household. "They're probably next door playing with the neighbors' kids. If they come back while I'm gone, please let them know I went to the store to get a few important things. And some not important things," Rita explained, attempting to diffuse any potential criticism. Mary's disapproval was palpable. "Back in my day, we called that child neglect. Leaving your children unattended, how irresponsible," she scolded, her tone accusatory. Rita rolled her eyes, struggling to maintain her patience. "Trace is 12, Mother Franklin, and the others are perfectly responsible on their own. And besides, you're here. They'll be okay for 15 minutes. Just make yourself at home," she replied, her frustration thinly veiled. With that, Rita made her exit, leaving Mary to settle into the Franklin household. As she walked out to her car, Trace struggled with comically large suitcases and handbags, a look of concern on his face. "She isn't moving in with us, is she, Mom?" Trace asked anxiously as Rita patted him on the shoulder reassuringly. "No, she's not, son," Rita confirmed, a mixture of exhaustion and determination in her tone. Rita glanced back at the house, a mix of emotions swirling within her. It was going to be a challenging few days with her mother-in-law, but Rita was determined to navigate the storm with grace and resilience. With a final nod to Trace, she headed to her car. Rita had just returned home from a tiring grocery run, her arms laden with bags filled with essentials. Balancing the weight, she struggled to unlock the front door. In a flash, Buffy sprinted out, followed by Shag. Rita sighed, resigned to the chaos that often ensued in their household. Setting the groceries on the kitchen counter, she noticed her kids engaged in a lively chase through the house. "Trace, go get Shag before he causes trouble again," Rita called out to her eldest son. "Okay, Mom," Trace replied, darting off. Turning her attention to her daughter Courtney, Rita suggested, "Why don't you three go play outside for a while?" As Courtney and her siblings exited the house, Mary made her entrance, wearing an indignant expression. "There you are. Question. I saw a new family photo in the living room. Why didn't you give me one last month when I was over?" Mary inquired, her tone tinged with disapproval. Rolling her eyes, Rita replied as she unpacked groceries. "We just had it taken a week ago, Mother Franklin." Mary peered into the bags and commented, "Jerry looked rather gaunt in that photo too. Have you been feeding him well?" Annoyed, Rita's frustration surfaced. "Yes, Mother Franklin," she retorted tersely. Inspecting the grocery bags further, Mary remarked, "I don't see any lemons or honey. I told you to get Jerry some for his cold yesterday on the phone." Exasperated, Rita turned to face Mary squarely. "Jerry doesn't have a cold anymore. He's fine." Mary, unconvinced, asserted, "I've been his mother a lot longer than you've been his wife. I can tell when my son isn't feeling well. You should be a good wife and go back to the store to get him some lemon and honey." Rita's frustration mounted. "I told you Jerry doesn't have a cold anymore. And even if he did, I would take care of him without your interference." Offended by Rita's tone, Mary bristled. "You don't have to be so rude. Where are your manners, young lady?" Feeling a headache coming on, Rita attempted to diffuse the situation. "I've got a terrible headache. I'm going to lay down for a bit. Could you keep an eye on the kids?" Mary, still perturbed, shot back sarcastically, "I thought you didn't want my help." "Fine, don't keep an eye on them," Rita replied wearily. "Just, if they come in, please ask them to keep it down." As Rita made her way out of the kitchen, Mary muttered to herself, "Unbelievable. Ask them to keep it down. What kind of mother does that?" The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting warm hues across the living room where Mary was calmly enjoying a snack of olives. Trace bounded into the room with Shag. "Hi, Grandma, where's Mom?" Trace inquired cheerfully. Mary, nonchalantly retrieving more olives from the fridge, replied, "She went upstairs because she has an unbearable headache. Does she do that often, leaving all of you alone?" There was a hint of disapproval in her tone. Taking an apple from the fruit basket, Trace defended his mother. "No." Mary popped an olive into her mouth, chewing thoughtfully. "She probably knows, since I have so much experience raising your father, that I would be far better suited to taking care of you kids than she is." Trace rolled his eyes, taking a bite of his apple and choosing not to engage further in the conversation. As Mary finished her olives, a mischievous idea crossed her mind. "Trace, why don't you call all of your friends over?" Trace hesitated, sensing a potential clash. Did Mom say it was okay?" "Of course, dear, it's fine. Tell them we're having a party," Mary encouraged, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Suspicious but curious, Trace shrugged and went to call his friends. Meanwhile, upstairs, Rita was still battling her pounding headache, hoping for a moment of peace. However, her hopes were quickly shattered as screams, laughter, and loud music erupted from downstairs. Confused and enraged, she scrambled out of bed and rushed downstairs, only to find the house in disarray. Popcorn littered the floor, music blared at maximum volume, and children ran amok, engaged in a fierce pillow fight. Feathers from torn pillows floated like snow, covering every surface. Rita's eyes widened in horror as she spotted Buffy, the cat, covered in chocolate. With a thunderous whistle, Rita commanded attention, halting the chaos instantly. "What on earth is going on here?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a knife. All the kids froze, their faces a mix of fear and guilt. Trace, the first to approach Rita, glanced at Mary, who was lounging in a chair with a casual air. Grandma said it was okay to have a party," Trace explained tentatively. Rita's glare intensified as she turned her gaze to Mary. "Well, Grandma's lost her mind, son. Tell your friends to leave now." Acting quickly, Trace ushered his friends out of the house while Rita surveyed the aftermath of the impromptu party. Feathers floated in the air like a surreal scene from a dream-turned-nightmare. Frustrated and angry, Rita picked up a torn pillow, watching as feathers cascaded from it. She shot a look of disbelief at Mary, who sat unperturbed, wearing a smug expression. "All I asked for was a quiet house to take a nap in, and what did you do? Start a rave?" Rita's voice dripped with frustration. Mary shrugged nonchalantly. "Well, don't expect me to clean up your house. They're your children after all." Rita stared at her incredulously. "You're the one who let them have a party and make this mess." "They were enjoying themselves until you showed up and ruined their fun," Mary countered with a self-satisfied grin. Rita face-palmed in frustration before turning to her children. "We are cleaning up this mess before your dad comes home. Courtney, go get the vacuum cleaner. Trace, work on that coffee table. Remy and Amy, gather up the pillows. Or what's left of them." Mary interjected with a smug smile. "I don't think you should make your children do a mother's work." Rita's patience snapped. "Really? Well, you know what? I don't think you've done very much thinking at all in a long time. Or anything else useful for that matter. And until you start, I suggest you be quiet and let us clean up your mess." Mary, insulted, retaliated. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm telling Jerry all about you when he comes home. I hope he divorces you. You're the most miserable young woman I've ever met in my life. I never thought you were good enough for him in the first place." "That's it," Rita declared, storming out of the room and returning with a large roll of tape, holding it threateningly in front of Mary. "Here's what's going to happen. You have 3 choices. You can leave, go to your room, or I'm going to wrap you up and shut your mouth until Jerry comes home tonight." Mary scoffed defiantly. "You will do no such thing." "Watch me!" Rita exclaimed, grabbing Mary and initiating a comedic struggle across the house. Feathers flew as the 2 women wrestled, the children rushing over and pleading for Rita to stop. Jerry arrived home after his shift, his airport security uniform crisp and tidy. He called out for Rita upon entering, but the only response was silence. Puzzled, he hung up his coat and repeated his inquiry, receiving no answer once more. The house felt strangely empty, and Jerry's concern grew. "Where is everyone?" he muttered to himself, scanning the quiet rooms. Curiosity piqued, Jerry ventured further into the house, his footsteps echoing softly. As he turned a corner into the dining room, his eyes widened in shock. Seated around the table were his 4 kids and his mother, each securely taped to their chairs with tape covering their mouths. Even Shag had a piece of tape over his snout. "What in tarnation is going on?" Jerry exclaimed, his heart racing as he surveyed the bizarre scene. Approaching cautiously, Jerry ripped the tape off Trace's mouth, prompting the teenager to speak up. "Dad, glad you're here," Trace exclaimed, relief evident in his voice. "What happened?" Jerry asked, bewildered. Trace quickly untaped Courtney, who chimed in. "Mom did it." Jerry face-palmed, trying to make sense of the situation. "Where's she?" "I think she's in the laundry room," Courtney replied. Determined to unravel this mystery, Jerry instructed, "Just get everyone free. Oh, Rita, what have you done?" Following the trail of taped family members, Jerry made his way to the laundry room where he found Rita busying herself with the washing machine. Amidst the whirring and churning of water, a muffled meow caught Jerry's attention. He confronted Rita, his voice tinged with disbelief and frustration. "What in the world did you tape everyone up for?" Jerry demanded, his concern evident. Rita turned to face him, her expression surprisingly nonchalant. "They were having a party with your mother and destroying the house. You should be thanking me." Another loud meow pierced through the laundry room's noise, prompting Jerry to investigate further. He swung open the washing machine's lid, revealing a drenched and soapy Buffy. "Oh, come on, this is too much," Jerry exclaimed, running a hand through his hair in exasperation. "What is Buffy doing here?" Rita explained matter-of-factly. "One of the kids decided she'd look better brown, so they dumped cocoa powder all over her. I wasn't about to wash her in the sink." Jerry's gaze shifted between the soggy cat and his wife, his expression a mix of incredulity and amusement. Buffy let out a pitiful whine, adding to the chaotic scene that awaited Jerry's return home. The door to Dr. Martin's office flung open with a resounding bang, shattering the serene atmosphere of the waiting room. Jerry Franklin struggled to pull his wife, Rita, inside. Her hands were cuffed, and her mouth was taped shut, a desperate measure to contain her volatile outbursts. The receptionist's eyes widened in shock as she took in the scene unfolding before her. "Excuse me, we need to see Dr. Martin, now!" Jerry's voice was frantic, his eyes pleading for understanding as he addressed the horrified receptionist. Without delay, the receptionist urgently reached for the phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Dr. Martin's extension. Moments later, the psychiatrist burst through a door, his expression a mix of confusion and concern as he took in the restrained Rita alongside Jerry. "What is the meaning of this?" Dr. Martin's voice held a blend of surprise and disapproval as he approached the trio. "I'm so sorry, but I had to bring her in like this. We've got a real problem and—" Jerry's explanation was cut short as Dr. Martin moved to remove the tape from Rita's mouth, unleashing a torrent of rage. "Release me right now!" Rita's voice was filled with fury as she struggled against her restraints. "Mr. Franklin, you'd better have a good explanation for this. I mean, this is just unprecedented. Are you sure this was—" Dr. Martin's words were interrupted by Rita's threat. "I'm going to kill you!" Rita's eyes blazed with anger. Jerry, standing nearby, pointed to Rita as if to say, "There's your explanation." Dr. Martin, trying to diffuse the escalating tension, walked over to Rita, his tone soothing yet firm. "Now everything's going to be okay, Mrs. Franklin, I assure you. Mr. Franklin, where are the keys to the handcuffs?" Jerry hesitated for a moment before reluctantly retrieving the keys from his pocket. "I don't think that's a good idea, Doc," he protested weakly. Ignoring Jerry's protests, Dr. Martin took the keys and freed Rita from her restraints. "Everything is under control now, Mr. Franklin. Now, if you would, please have a seat. Your wife and I will be having a little chat about what happened." "But," Jerry tried to interject, only to be silenced by Dr. Martin's stern glare. "Sit down, Mr. Franklin. I'll be back in a short while," Dr. Martin commanded, his tone brooking no argument. Turning his attention back to Rita, Dr. Martin spoke gently. "Mrs. Franklin, would you mind coming to my office?" "For what? I don't know you," Rita retorted, suspicion lacing her words as she eyed Dr. Martin warily. "I'm a psychiatrist, ma'am. Your husband came to see me earlier today concerning your previous behaviors. I merely wish to hear your side of the story and clarify a few things," Dr. Martin explained calmly, his demeanor reassuring. Rita's gaze shifted from Dr. Martin to Jerry, a skeptical smirk playing on her lips. "All right then." With a resigned sigh, she followed Dr. Martin into his office, the door closing behind them, leaving Jerry alone in the now quiet waiting room, his thoughts swirling with apprehension and hope for a resolution to their tumultuous situation. Dr. Martin sat calmly in a nearby chair, inviting Rita to take a seat. "Please sit down," he offered politely. Rita, however, was anything but cooperative. She stood before him, her posture rigid with indignation. "I don't want to sit down," she retorted firmly. Dr. Martin shrugged, maintaining his professional demeanor. "Well, you're welcome to stand up as well. Would you care for anything to drink?" Crossing her arms defensively, Rita declined the offer. "No, I don't. I don't want to be here." Understanding the tension, Dr. Martin tried to ease the atmosphere. "I understand, but I wish to get your side of the story, Mrs. Franklin." His gaze shifted momentarily to Rita's unique blue earrings, a subtle attempt to redirect the conversation. "Those are very unusual earrings you have. Did your husband give them to you for a special occasion?" Rita's expression softened slightly as she touched one of the earrings. "You like these?" she responded with a sarcastic smile. Meanwhile, outside in the waiting room, Jerry sat nervously flipping through a Time magazine. Minutes passed before Rita hastily sprinted past him, her expression unreadable as she exited the office without a word. Muffled screams emanated from Dr. Martin's office, prompting Jerry to stand abruptly, his concern evident. As he moved towards the office, the receptionist hurried down the hallway to investigate. Opening the door, she was met with a scene that left her horrified, and she let out a piercing shriek. Jerry, alerted by the commotion, rushed to the office's entrance and peered inside, his shock palpable. Dr. Martin lay on the floor, his usually composed demeanor shattered. He was handcuffed and his mouth partially taped. His shoes were off and tied around his head, and a small fire smoldered in his shirt pocket from a neglected pipe. Shattered glasses adorned his face, and Rita's distinctive earrings were inexplicably pierced through his ears. Reacting swiftly, Jerry hurried to free Dr. Martin from his bizarre predicament. "She's crazy!" Dr. Martin exclaimed as Jerry worked to remove the restraints. "I told you!" Jerry exclaimed in agreement, his voice strained with a mix of disbelief and frustration. The receptionist, now in action mode, declared, I'm calling the police. Dr. Martin, now freed but sporting Rita's earrings as unexpected accessories, shook his head. No, that won't do. She needs some serious help. And Mrs. Simon, come see what you can do about getting these things out of my ears. The assistant, Mrs. Simon, approached tentatively, attempting to delicately remove the earrings. Each pull elicited a comedic yelp from Dr. Martin. Jerry stood across from Dr. Martin, his face etched with concern and uncertainty. What do you suggest we do? Jerry inquired, his voice laden with worry. Dr. Martin, adjusting his slightly sore ears after the removal of one of Rita's earrings, leaned forward with a serious expression. We have got to get her into a psychiatric treatment center. Nodding, Jerry absorbed the gravity of the situation. For how long? He pressed for details. 2 weeks, maybe 3, Dr. Martin proposed, contemplating the duration. But first, we have to get her in. Do you think you can get her to go in voluntarily? Jerry's skepticism was evident as he shook his head and shrugged. I doubt it, he admitted. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on Dr. Martin's shoulders. Well, we'd better get her in soon before she seriously injures someone else. As the assistant deftly removed the last earring from Dr. Martin's ears, eliciting a comedic yelp from the psychiatrist, the plan began to take shape. Now go home, Mr. Franklin, Dr. Martin advised, his voice tinged with exhaustion. Try to talk to her. See if you can get her to go willingly. If not, we could try to get a judge to order her there. Jerry nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. All right, I'll try. You going to be all right? He inquired, concerned for the psychiatrist's well-being after the ordeal. Yes, I think so, Dr. Martin reassured him, albeit with a touch of humor despite the discomfort. Thanks for not calling the police, Jerry added sheepishly, acknowledging the unusual circumstances they found themselves in. Dr. Martin winced slightly as his assistant applied band-aids to his ears. In cases like this, diagnosis and treatment usually lead to the greatest success, he remarked optimistically. I'm so sorry about all this, Doc, Jerry apologized sincerely. If you send me the bill, I'll pay for all the damages. Rest assured I will, Dr. Martin replied in a frustrated tone. With a final nod, Jerry hastily left the room. As he exited the building into the parking lot, he noticed his car was missing. Rita! Jerry screamed. The yellow taxicab rolled to a stop in the familiar driveway, and Jerry emerged, quickly paying the driver before sprinting toward the front door. Mary greeted him with a mix of relief and exasperation. About time you came home, Mary exclaimed. Rita stormed upstairs a few minutes ago. The children are very upset. That woman needs to be committed. Jerry, preoccupied with his own concerns, ignored his mother's commentary and hurried into the house. Inside, the living room was filled with the worried faces of his 4 children. What's going on, Dad? Trace, the eldest, asked with a furrowed brow. Everything's going to be okay, don't worry, Jerry reassured them hastily before bounding up the stairs to the bedroom where Rita had disappeared. Entering the room, Jerry found Rita in a frenzy, hastily packing clothes into suitcases. What are you doing? Jerry asked, concern evident in his voice. I'm leaving. You can have the kids and your mother. I'm moving out, Rita declared angrily, her eyes brimming with tears. No, Rita, no. This is just a problem we have to deal with, Jerry pleaded, trying to calm the escalating situation. Rita continued packing, glaring at Jerry with resentment. Problem? You're the problem. How dare you drag me into a Fruit Loop psychiatrist's office? That was insane. Jerry attempted to reason with her. I'm sorry, but what you were doing was insane. You've been acting out for months, and now this with my mother and the kids. Well, if I'm crazy, it's you and your crooked-nosed mother that made me crazy, Rita retorted bitterly. My mother does not have a crooked nose, Jerry corrected her, exasperated. Yes, she does, Rita insisted, her frustration boiling over. No, she doesn't. And don't you realize all the trouble you could be in right now if Dr. Martin called the police? Jerry pressed, trying to make Rita understand the severity of the situation. Rita shrugged, seemingly indifferent to the potential consequences. He said he liked the earrings. I thought he should wear them if he liked them so much. Made my ears hurt all day. Jerry shook his head in disbelief. Why didn't you just take them off? And why'd you set his shirt on fire with his pipe? He asked if I minded if he smoked. I told him he needed a filter. He asked me how to filter it, and I showed him, Rita explained, her reasoning sounding nonsensical even to her. Frustrated, Jerry halted Rita's frantic packing and tried to get her to listen. Rita, stop and listen to yourself for a minute. Think about what you've been saying. Think about what you've been doing. He could have you put in jail for assaulting him, but he didn't. He wants you to get help, and I do too. Rita, overwhelmed and tearful, sat down on the bed, finally allowing herself to be comforted by Jerry's embrace. You need to have a medical and psychiatric evaluation. It'll only be a couple of weeks. Jerry urged gently, hoping to persuade Rita to seek the help she needed. You want me put away? Rita sobbed, her fear and confusion evident. No, Rita. I just want some tests done to find out why you've been acting like this. You won't be committed or anything. I just want you to be well. Jerry reassured her, holding her close. Dr. Martin isn't going to press charges, is he? Rita asked, her voice trembling with anxiety. No, but you owe him an apology, don't you? Jerry prompted gently, seeking accountability. Rita hesitated before relenting. Maybe? Jerry echoed, a hint of exasperation in his tone. Fine, I do, Rita admitted reluctantly, her pride momentarily set aside. Jerry kissed her forehead and stood up. I'm going to try and get him on the phone and ask him a few questions, okay? Rita nodded silently, her emotions still raw from the tumultuous events of the day. Jerry picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Martin's number, hoping for a positive resolution to the challenging situation they found themselves in. Dr. Martin sat at his desk, nursing his slightly sore ears adorned with band-aids, remnants of the chaotic events that had unfolded earlier. The ringing of his phone interrupted his thoughts, and he picked up the receiver. Mr. Franklin, you're alive! Dr. Martin exclaimed with a touch of humor, relieved to hear from Jerry after the tumultuous encounter with Rita. Yeah, I am, Jerry replied, his voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and determination. Rita's doing a little better now. She's agreed to go to the clinic for an evaluation. As the conversation progressed, Jerry jotted down the name and address of the clinic provided by Dr. Martin, mentally preparing for the next steps in Rita's journey to recovery. All right, and one more thing, Jerry added before handing the phone to Rita. Rita would like to say a few things to you, Doc. Rita hesitated briefly before taking the phone, her voice tinged with remorse and uncertainty. Dr. Martin, I'm sorry for what happened. I don't know what got into me. Dr. Martin's response was understanding and empathetic. I understand. We need to find out what's going on. I've given your husband the name of an appropriate clinic. After treatment, I'd like for you to come by my office. I still have a few trinkets of yours from your last visit you should reclaim. Rita shook her head, her regret palpable. I'm really sorry about all of that. Are your ears okay? Well, I'll survive, Dr. Martin replied with a hint of wry humor. If I ever take to wearing earrings, I won't have to worry about getting pierced. You've done that much. Just take care and head to the clinic. Everything will be all right, Mrs. Franklin. All right, thank you, Rita responded earnestly, grateful for the understanding and support. Returning the phone to Jerry, Rita expressed her gratitude with a simple, "Thanks, Doc." Jerry hung up the phone and enveloped Rita in a comforting embrace, reassurance evident in his voice as he whispered, "Everything's going to be okay." The sun hung low in the sky as Jerry and Rita pulled into the parking lot of St. Valley's Mental Health Institute. The imposing building loomed ahead, its grandeur matched only by the weight of the situation they faced. Jerry glanced at Rita, her expression a mix of apprehension and resignation, as they exited the car and made their way towards the entrance. Hand in hand, Jerry led Rita through the doors and into the reception area. A few minutes passed as they sat together in front of a desk, signing the necessary paperwork. On the other side of the desk sat Dr. Brownsville, a seasoned doctor in his 50s, clad in a crisp white jacket. All right, Mrs. Franklin, Dr. Brownsville began, addressing Rita with a reassuring tone. Everything's going to be okay. Mr. Franklin, we will take good care of your wife. We've spoken to Dr. Martin and he's filled us in on the situation, so we have a good idea of where to start. Rita's gaze shifted nervously between Jerry and the doctor. When can I go home? She asked, her voice betraying a hint of anxiety. If the tests turn out positive and there are no serious underlying problems, you'll be back home in about 10 days, Mrs. Franklin, Dr. Brownsville explained calmly. Just then, a formidable figure entered the room. Wanda, a large and overwhelming female nurse dressed in white. Rita, this is Wanda, Dr. Brownsville introduced. She will escort you to your room. If you need anything at all, just ask. Wanda nodded in acknowledgement. "Mrs. Franklin, come with me, please," she instructed, prompting Rita to stand up. Before leaving, Rita turned to Jerry and planted a kiss on his cheek. "Everything's going to be okay, honey," Jerry reassured her. "Don't worry about the kids. I'll have Mother stay with them until you come home." Rita's expression flickered briefly at the mention of Mary, her mother-in-law, but she resigned herself to the situation. With a final hug for Jerry, she followed Wanda out of the room, leaving Jerry and Dr. Brownsville alone. "Don't worry, Mr. Franklin," Dr. Brownsville offered words of comfort. "We've come across situations like this before. Brief medication and therapy typically resolve all issues in due time. She is in very capable hands, I assure you." "When can I come visit her?" Jerry inquired, concern etched in his features. "I'll give you a call tomorrow and inform you of our progress," Dr. Brownsville promised. Nodding gratefully, Jerry thanked the doctor before taking his leave. As he stepped outside, a mix of emotions swirled within him: worry for Rita, hope for her recovery, and a deep sense of gratitude for the professionals who were now caring for his wife during this challenging time. Rita sat on the edge of her small room's bed, her gaze fixed on the window overlooking the serene courtyard outside. Her thoughts were a tumultuous whirlwind of emotions as she watched Jerry's car pull out of the Institute's parking lot. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, reflecting the turmoil within her. As Rita wrestled with her inner turmoil, Nurse Wanda entered the room, her presence announced by the soft click of the door. In one hand, Wanda held a syringe, and in the other, 2 pills nestled in a small cup. Rita turned to face her, curiosity and apprehension mingling in her expression. "What are those for?" Rita inquired, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Dr. Brownsville ordered these for you," Wanda replied calmly, her tone gentle yet firm. Rita's eyes flickered between the syringe and the pills. "What are they for?" she pressed, seeking clarity. "The shot is to relax you, and the pills are for depression," Wanda explained, her words chosen with care. "They will help you feel better." Rita's apprehension grew evident as she stared at the needle in Wanda's hand. "I don't want a shot," she stated firmly, her voice tinged with anxiety. Wanda's expression softened, understanding Rita's reluctance. "Mrs. Franklin, it is for your own good," she reassured, her tone gentle yet persuasive. "If you cooperate, we'll have you back home in no time, okay?" Reluctantly, Rita accepted the cup containing the 2 pills and a glass of water from Wanda. She hesitated for a moment before swallowing the pills, a silent acknowledgement of her need for help. Wanda then approached Rita with the syringe, poised to administer the shot that had caused her such apprehension. The Franklin household's kitchen was a scene of subdued chaos as Jerry sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy amidst the tension. The children, Amy, Trace, Courtney, and Remy, were seated around the table, their plates piled high with an unappealing mix of squash, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and thick slices of Spam. Mary presided over the meal with an air of rigid formality, her disapproval evident in the way she surveyed the uneaten food. Mary's keen eyes caught the lack of enthusiasm from her grandkids. "Is something wrong with your food?" she inquired, her tone edged with annoyance. Amy, the youngest, voiced what the others were feeling. "I miss Mommy. I want her to come home," she whimpered, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. Jerry, ever the comforting presence, offered reassurance. "She'll be home soon, sweetheart. You know she hasn't been well lately. The doctors are going to help her get better." Trace, the eldest, piped up with a hopeful request. "Can we go see her, Dad?" Mary interjected sharply, squashing any hope in Trace's voice. "Hush now, Trace. Don't bother your father while he's eating. Besides, your mother will be gone for a long, long time, so get used to it." Jerry's brow furrowed with frustration at Mary's words. "Hey, don't say that. Kids, your mother will be back real soon, I promise." Mary, however, couldn't resist adding her own judgment to the mix. "They'd better keep that crazy mother of yours in for some time." Trace's innocent question hung heavy in the air. "Dad, is Mom crazy?" Jerry hesitated, caught between protecting his children and maintaining honesty. "No, son, she isn't crazy. She's just—" Mary's outburst cut Jerry off mid-sentence as she slammed her drink on the table, her patience wearing thin. "Jerry, don't you lie to your children like that. She is crazy, and you know it." The atmosphere at the table grew more tense by the second. Trace, unable to process the conflicting messages, bolted from his seat and ran out of the room in distress. Jerry sighed heavily, putting down his fork and face-palming at the turn of events. "Look what you've done," he chided Mary, his tone a mix of disappointment and frustration. Mary, unfazed by Jerry's reproach, remained as stubborn as ever. "It's not my fault. You're the one that married her. I told you I didn't approve of her, but you wouldn't listen." As the uncomfortable meal continued, Courtney, the eldest daughter, sought an escape. "May I be excused?" she asked quietly, her appetite clearly diminished. Mary's disapproval flared once more. "You haven't eaten, young lady." "I'm not hungry," Courtney responded, her voice tinged with sadness. Courtney left the room, followed by Amy and Remy, their appetites stifled by the tension. Mary seethed with anger, her gaze shifting to the untouched food on the table. "Fine, don't expect me to fix any of you anything again. Spoiled, rotten children. It's not my house, and I'm not your maid," she shouted after them, her voice echoing through the now eerily quiet house. Left alone at the table, Mary's frustration simmered as she begrudgingly continued eating her food, the strained silence serving as a stark reminder of the fractures within the family. The gentle hum of the night was interrupted by the soft murmur of voices in Trace's room. Jerry, his father, sat perched on the edge of the bed, a comforting presence amidst the turmoil that had settled over their family. Trace's eyes were filled with a mix of confusion and hurt as he struggled to make sense of the evening's events. "Everything's going to be okay, son." Jerry's voice was a steady anchor in the storm of emotions. "Your grandma didn't mean the things she said?" Trace's response was immediate, his tone tinged with defiance and sadness. "Yes, she did. Why does she hate Mom so much?" Jerry sighed inwardly, grappling with the delicate balance of truth and protection. "Your grandma doesn't hate Mom," he explained gently, his eyes meeting Trace's. "They just disagree on just about everything. When you get older, you'll understand. Sometimes people never agree with each other on anything." Before Trace could respond, a soft knock echoed through the room, and the door swung open to reveal Courtney, Remy, and Amy standing in the doorway. "Can we come in?" Courtney's voice was hesitant, her concern mirroring Trace's. Jerry nodded, welcoming his children into the room. "Sure, honey, come in. We need to have a talk." The children gathered around their father, their expressions a mix of curiosity and worry as Jerry began to explain the situation in terms they could understand. "What we have here is a family crisis," Jerry started, choosing his words carefully to convey the gravity of the situation without overwhelming them. Remy's brow furrowed in confusion. "What's a crisis?" Trace's response was tinged with frustration. "It means we're in trouble, stupid." Jerry gently intervened before the tension could escalate. "A family crisis is like a baseball team that's playing long and hard each game," he started, casting his gaze around the room to ensure he had their attention. "They want to make it big, right? But before the big game, one of them gets hurt and can't play. The rest of the team gets worried and scared. But you know what the coach tells his team?" "What?" Amy's voice was filled with curiosity. "He huddles the team together, in a room like this." Jerry gestured around the bedroom, creating a visual image for them. "And he says, guys, we're still winning this game. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it if we stick together and play as a team." Trace's gaze softened, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. "We're not a team without Mom, though." Jerry nodded, acknowledging Trace's point. "We're not a complete team, son. We're down one of our most valuable players. But that doesn't mean we give up. We keep going. That's what your mother would want us to do." Amy's voice broke the thoughtful silence. "Will she ever come home, Dad?" Jerry's assurance was unwavering. "Of course she will. The doctors told me it'll only be maybe a week or two." Trace's concern shifted to another topic. "Does that mean Grandma is going to stay all that time?" Jerry took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "For the time being, yes. Your grandma does love you. She took care of me when I was growing up, and I turned out okay, right?" The children exchanged glances, a hint of reluctant agreement in their expressions as Trace spoke up. "For a dad, I guess so." Jerry chuckled softly, appreciating the humor in Trace's response. "Thanks. Well, while Mom is off getting well, Grandma will be a big help to all of us. I know she has her own ways, but she still cooked a decent meal for us. And it's polite for us to at least try it out." The children nodded in understanding, their bond as a family strengthening in the face of adversity. Jerry stood up from the bed, his gaze sweeping over his children with love and determination. "I'm going back downstairs. Anyone joining me?" Jerry's invitation was met with hesitant nods and murmurs of agreement as the children stood up, ready to face the challenges ahead as a united front. "All right then, let's go," Jerry said, leading the way out of Trace's room, a sense of hope and resilience guiding their steps. As the evening settled over the Franklin household, casting long shadows across the rooms, Jerry found himself engrossed in a phone call that held both tension and a glimmer of hope. His voice was laced with concern as he spoke to Dr. Brownsville. "Yes, Mr. Franklin, you can come visit your wife tomorrow." Dr. Brownsville's calm yet authoritative voice came through the receiver. "However, I don't recommend your children come at this time." Jerry's brows furrowed in confusion, a hint of worry creeping into his tone. "Why's that?" Dr. Brownsville's explanation was measured, his words chosen carefully to convey the gravity of the situation. "You see, in such a stressful situation, the presence of children tends to bring an overwhelming maternal instinct in some individuals. Your wife may insist on leaving us too soon before she is ready. I've already had a discussion with her about this matter." Jerry's concern deepened, his thoughts turning to Rita and the challenges she was facing. What does she think about all this? There was a pause on the line, a moment of hesitation before Dr. Brownsville responded. "She isn't happy about it at all, but I believe I've convinced her to cooperate for the time being." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air as Jerry processed the information. "All right, I'll come over tomorrow," he finally replied, a mix of determination and worry in his voice. With a solemn acknowledgement, Jerry hung up the phone, the conversation with Dr. Brownsville leaving him with a sense of apprehension about what the next day would bring.